Let's talk about suffering and the arts today. Hello, I'm Lynell. I'm an artist and a maker of stuff. I post videos about art, creative living, and doing the best we can as a one-woman dysfunctional support group for fellow creative weirdos. Also, I occasionally live stream art studio sessions for hanging out and chatting. This sounds like your kind of content? Subscribe and put on those notifications so you never miss a thing. As an artist who myself has experienced trauma, has ADHD, has struggles with depression and anxiety, I've long been fascinated by finding out what, if any, connection there actually might be between those things and creativity and the arts. I mean, who hasn't heard of the plight of the tortured artist? Brilliant, creative minds that can't contain the pain of human existence, driven to pour their delicate souls out onto their canvases before succumbing to the weight of their own agony. It's a popular idea that has been romanticized and used to convince us that artists have an untouchable mystique. Isn't it a little bit romantic to go and make something beautiful out of human suffering? But really, is there actually anything to this trope? Or is it nothing more than a stereotype that we throw a handful of anecdotal evidence points to and say, yep, that's for sure it? Does suffering actually make one more creative? I've read several articles where authors have taken what I think is a rather reductive stance to say that great art requires great suffering. But is that any more than an obnoxious opinion? What do we actually know? It's safe to say that we know that suffering doesn't make somebody become an artist. And we know that not all artists feel that they are or have suffered. What else can we know? We likely can point out plenty of examples of artists who we know have suffered. From Van Gogh to Francis Bacon to Sylvia Plath and Kurt Cobain, the list goes on. There are many well-known artists that we can point to and say, see, look at all these examples. But how many brilliant artists wouldn't be looked at as tortured? It's almost impossible to know because very few lives are lived without hardship. And what one person would view as a torturous experience may be a blip on the radar to somebody else. It's pretty subjective, of course. Unless maybe you have an actual diagnosis of a mental illness or otherwise, which frankly is not something we have for most artists that existed outside of the last 100 or so years. The DSM-5 is a relatively new document in the course of human history. Maybe it would help if we tried to define suffering. In this context, suffering usually means either trauma from hardships such as abuse, injury, poverty, sickness, or suffering from a mental illness. There's of course plenty of overlap between those things. So let's start with trauma. We know trauma can be debilitating. It can lead to PTSD, addiction, and contribute to a myriad other mental illnesses. In many ways, the questions about how trauma and mental health impact creativity overlap. When you think of it, I don't think it would be shocking to say that trauma can actually stifle creativity. However, there may also be the potential for different types of growth. There is the idea of something called post-traumatic growth, where a trauma survivor is able to reflect and process in a healthy way, leading to positive growth. So, post-traumatic growth suggests that coming out of the other side of a traumatic experience can shake a person's view of themselves and the world around them and realign what they view as important.
But I do know that many of those who are driven to this life are desperately searching for those pockets of silence where we can root and grow. We must all hope we find them.
There's one study, interestingly, that suggests that surviving trauma didn't actually lead to much in the way of growth, but it did show an increase in empathy, potential for the increase in empathy. And empathy can help artists to create very impactful artwork by being able to express feelings and experiences in an authentic and relatable way.
This ability of art to link us to others and arouse feelings within us is one of the primary reasons people like art. If we let it, art can penetrate the jaded armor of modern existence many of us wear, inviting us to feel what someone else once felt, someone who might live far away or in centuries past.
And possibly trauma can lead to isolation due to injury or fear or other reasons, which then can lead to rejecting social conventions, as well as potentially expanding the imagination through the isolation. A good example of this is artist Frida Kahlo, who suffered a massive injury in her teens from a bus accident. While she spent months recovering in a full body cast, bedbound, her parents provided for her a special easel that she could place over herself while she was laying down in bed, and they put a mirror in the canopy of her bed so that she could paint self-portraits while she was stuck there. This time and experience changed the course of her life, not just because of the lifelong impact of the tremendous injuries that she suffered, but it also changed her plans of going to school to become a doctor and shifted her focus to creating art. In regard to mental illness and creativity, a lot of the related studies look specifically at bipolar or schizophrenic disorders. But mental illness would also include many more issues like depression, addiction, identity disorders, anxiety disorders. Divergences like autism and ADHD are often thrown into that bucket as well. The studies that exist looking at creativity and mental illness as a whole are pretty inconclusive when you take them all together. Some of them say if you're not too mentally ill, you might be more likely to be creative, like during manic periods for bipolar folks, or having unique perspectives by the experience of having schizophrenic disorder. But this does not work if you are too mentally ill, according to these studies, because one thing that I think most people can agree on, psychological stress is actually a hindrance to creativity.
I don't know what goes on in artists' heads, but I think all the great artists loved working. A lot of people say, well, suffering is good for art. Look at Van Gogh, they say. And I say, let's take a look at Van Gogh. Van Gogh didn't go out painting because he hated it, or he was suffering. The only time he was happy probably was when he was painting. He painted because he loved to paint. And the rest of his life was pretty miserable. He didn't sell anything. He was broke. A lot of times he's probably really hungry. It's just common sense. Suffering reduces. It's the enemy. Negativity is the enemy of creativity.
What actual support is there then for the connection of mental illness and creativity? Some studies look at the connection of mental illness and people who work in creative fields and the higher levels that exist there, but they aren't higher than other stressful fields. And it's really looking more at the state of the industry and the stress caused by it than anything else. So that's not really what I'm interested in here. So let's see. Anxiety and depression, they can lead to rumination and reflection. It can, for creators, inform their artistic expression. Perhaps afflictions that reduce inhibitions would help with creativity. For example, those with ADHD, with their divergent thinking combined with less inhibitions, could contribute to greater creativity and out-of-the-box thinking. But creativity is an ability that can be cultivated by anybody, simply by a few pointers of, say, having a practice of capturing ideas, seeking out challenges, increasing your knowledge, and surrounding yourself with other creative people. What does it come down to? What is apparent is that science and studies of the idea of the tortured artist, and there are quite a few, or suffering related to creativity are not very telling of anything. Even the idea of post-traumatic growth is debated in the psychological world. If anything, science does back up that art is an effective tool for wellness. Creating or enjoying artwork can increase serotonin levels. It can increase blood flow to the part of the brain associated with pleasure. It can foster new ways of thinking. It can help you imagine a more hopeful future, and who doesn't want all of that?
Focused on understanding how our brains and bodies change on art, and how by knowing that we can really think about our health and well-being in ways that we might not have thought about it in the past.
Art therapy is considered extremely successful, and through that, art is used to improve overall well-being and focus, help with processing and expressing emotions. It can improve communication and relationships, and increase self-esteem, and build emotional resilience. So maybe some people just happen to turn to the creative arts, at which they have some draw or propensity to, for self-soothing, coping, and processing their suffering. Maybe they just inadvertently have felt the wellness benefits of creating art when they've done it in the past, so they continue to do so. And because suffering is pretty universal, it often speaks to us as the consumers of art. One thing we can say for sure is that if you make art, your experiences may inform the art that you make. And that's it. That's really the only thing that we can say for certain when it comes to the idea of the tortured artist. So, what did I get out of this research? Nothing concrete, but also nothing surprising. We're human. Everybody finds ways to cope, good or bad, healthy or not. And sometimes it ends up being something that you can share with the world. So if you enjoyed this rambling video, if you like concepts and topics related to art, creative living, creative weirdos, and just weirdness in general, be sure to subscribe and follow, and I hope to see you in the next video. Until then, maybe, get out there and make something. You'll probably feel pretty good for it.